In this video, we're going to apply a procedural texture to our robot character. This texture will find these corner edges and it will apply itself just the corner edges, those areas that would most likely get scuffed and dinged and scratched. And so we'll be able to apply a different shader to just those areas. If you want to research this more deeply, you can always go to the Solid Angle website. And this is the effect that we're going to add to our robot. So you can see here I've got parts from our model, just a few simple parts. When we're done, we can easily assign the same material to the rest of the robot in just a click. But while we're developing it, it'll be nice to work with just a small portion of the robot. Okay, so we'll start by assigning a layered shader to our object. Okay, make sure we're in the Rendering tab. We'll go to Lighting, Shading, Assign New Material, and this is actually a Maya shader. Here we are, Layered Shader. With this object active, we'll assign that. Now I'm going to change this view to the outliner and work in our hypershade. Let me shrink this down. Okay, we have a lot of material nodes here, so I'm going to delete unused nodes just to clean that up a little bit. Okay, and now we're going to create a couple of shaders, Arnold standard shaders. So we'll just go here, I'm going to click on Arnold shader. Okay, and we want to use the standard surface shader. So I'll click it once, first of all, and this one we're going to call green paint. Now I haven't assigned this to anything yet, I've just put it into our scene. I'll quickly give it a green color so that we can recognize it. Just for now, just this bright one, because we're going to replace that later. And then let's go here and we'll create a second one, standard surface. And this one we're going to call metal. Now we want to connect these shaders to our layered shader. So I'm going to click on the layered shader so that it shows up here. Okay, and then we'll see if we click on the shader here, then it changes it, right? So we're not able to click and drag. We want to make a connection, so we have to be connected to our layer shader, and we click down to drag with the middle mouse button, probably your scroll wheel, and then drag in there. See the little plus sign under the arrow, and then release, and then it'll show up there. So I'm going to click down again here, middle mouse button, drag and release. Okay, and then we don't need this one, so I'm going to click under here, just give it a little click and get rid of that one. So now we've just got these two shaders connected to the layered shader. Now we'll be able to see those connections if we go, see, with this connected, or with this selected still here, we can take a look at our input and output connections, and you'll see it graphed differently now. Okay, so these buttons up here control what you see in this node editor. Okay, and this says for whatever it happens to be selected, whether you're selecting from here or from here, either place, whatever selected, this says show me the inputs, and this says show me the inputs and the outputs, and this means show me the outputs. And then if you don't want to see anything, if you want to clear your screen, you just click that one, right? Or you could say add selected nodes to graph. I've got that one selected, and that's just showing just the layered shader, but then with it selected, so I could hit okay, show the in and out nodes. Okay, so we have two materials here, and they're both going into this layered shader. Okay, something's got to control which one of these shows where, right? The paint is going to be, right now it's that green color, but later we could plug a texture into it, which is the texture that we created in the UV space, right, in our earlier work. And later we can make this one look like a metal quite easily. So the rule, or the mechanism, that will decide which shader of these two will be seen is going to come from a curvature shader. Now the documentation calls it a curvature shader, but it's actually found under the texture area here. So click on AI curvature, and then we don't want just smooth curvature, we want to break it up a little bit. So we're also going to add a noise texture, and we'll connect that up to the curvature shader. So let's zoom in here, and we want to connect this to the radius attribute. Okay, as you can see, it doesn't want to make the connection, right? So another way we can do that is the old-fashioned way. We'll go to, with the AI curvature selected, go here to the radius attribute. Okay, and from here we'll put it, how about just putting a standard noise in there, just a fractal noise. Okay, and then we'll get this one and delete it. So now we want to apply this curvature shader to the transparency attribute of the layered shader. And see how if I click on that material, that's showing the attributes for the second layer, and here for the, well, for the top layer here. So I'm going to, over transparency, right click and say break that connection. Then I can put this curvature, whoops, onto that. Okay, remember in Maya, any kind of drag and drop action, you do it with your middle mouse button. Now we can see if there's an assignment made. So far, we see that. Now I want to be able to see these updates rendering, so I'm going to go to Arnold render view. Of course, it's going to show up black at this point. Whoops. And so we need to add a light to the scene, and a quick light to add. Here, let's just hit play. You'll see it's black, right? But a quick way to add a light to see updates is just to add here the sky dome light. Okay, so we can see already what it's looking like here. You can see the white starting up. So in your render view, you can move the camera around, right? So we're going to say window 3D manipulation, right? And then I can use it just like any other window, and I can get in close and see what the edges are looking like. And see their effect. See, here we've got the shader, so now we just need to play a little bit with the settings, but you can see that the curvature shader has found these curves and created transparency in the paint shader. And so we're seeing the metal shader underneath, which right now is just looking white. Okay, so I've arranged the windows here so that I can see my active Arnold render view going, so I can see my updates. Right here I can select these nodes to get to their attributes here. These are showing really large right now, so you can always click on these buttons up here to reduce their size. All I need out of them here is just to be selectable, right? So I can select the green paint by clicking here and make updates. I can select the metal by selecting there and making updates. Okay, so we can change the amplitude. Okay, now that's having an effect. We want that to be wider, and the threshold. Okay, the frequency is good. That seems to break it up the most. The implode seems to be adding these little holes in it, right? So if we take that down, it's smoother all around, but the frequency breaks it up the most. Okay, so I like these settings. I think that's a good amount of breakup, or it's the placement is right. So now let's turn our attention to each shader. So I'm going to try out first a preset. We'll choose maybe brushed metal. We'll say replace. And now that should be already close to a brushed metal kind of look. And of course we could play around more with that. And we can come to our green paint. Now we've got this kind of lime green going, but of course we could put a texture in. And what better texture to put in than the colors we've already created. So we'll click on that. We'll have that come from a file. Okay, and now this is where we insert the file. And we're going to find it here under Working Scene, Texture Fun, Source Images. Sampled diffuse color that we baked out before. We'll put that on. Alright, there's our colors from before. And we could put the dent in. Okay, to put our bump map in, we'll go over here to Geometry. Here, Bump Mapping. And we'll call up that texture from before. We'll get it from a file. Okay, now you can see that that's been put in there, but it's very subtle. Okay, we can see the effect of the bump map, but it's very subtle. Probably not even worth having, actually. But at least it can show you how things are organized. So what do we have here? We have a layered shader. If we click on it, we can see there's two materials, right, being layered, and the transparency of this one, the top one, is being controlled by the curvature, right? So if we go transparency and we click there, see that's AI curvature, that's this one, same one, and it has a radius that's being controlled by a noise map. There's the noise. Okay, and then we have two layers. We have the metal, and we just put in a preset for brushed metal. And for green paint, okay, we used instead of a color, solid color, we input our baked out textures that have the different colors onto that. And we also put in a bump map. We did that down here under Geometry, and we read that in from here. So now that we have our material set up, we can easily apply it to the actual model rather than this partial stand-in. So let's move this out of the way and this. Okay, things are looking a little weird in our window here, but we could always go shading, use default material, then it's easy to see what we're doing in here, right? So then we'll go to our outliner, and we're going to actually hide this one, and we'll go to our robot and show it, hitting the H key again, and I'm going to select all these objects, right? And then I'm just going to assign them our new material. So we're going to assign, you can't see because it's off the screen. I'm scrolling down to where it says assign existing material, and I'm going to choose layered shader 1, which we never did change the name, but that's what it's still called here. Okay, now you may have trouble like I just did trying to get it to render again, right? If that happens, just kill your Arnold render view and restart it and it'll work. So there we go. There's our textured little guy. You know, when I look at, I just hit 3 to smooth them out. It's taken out a little bit of that shader, but there's still some there. It seems a little incongruent to have him so glossy and still have roughness to him. So I think we'll make that quick change, right? So to do that, that will be pretty easy. We can go to the green paint shader, and then we can change the roughness. Also, the paint is not metal, so I'm going to take the metalness down too a little bit. That seems to darken them up. So you can play around with the settings, get the artistic look you're after, have some fun with it. This is kind of the icing on the cake, you know, changing these shaders. Once you've set everything up and done all the hard work of laying out UVs and plugging everything in, it's nice to be able to just move some sliders around and change things the way you'd like. So have some fun with it.